I took my Speed Twin in for its annual service a couple of days ago, and waiting for me on the forecourt were these two loan bikes, a Rocket 3 and a Tiger 660 Sport. Guess which one I was hoping they'd give me? Well, you've seen the thumbnail, so I guess you know which one I got. Unfortunately, someone else had booked the Rocket for a test ride later in the morning, so I was left with the Tiger. But always one for turning a disappointment into an opportunity, I thought, I'll do a comparison video with the TRANSALP. Completely different bikes? Well, not so fast. There's only €1,000 price difference. They're both tall rounders, and I've had comments from riders hesitating between road biased or slightly off-road, so I think the comparison is legitimate, even if the two bikes do feel very different to each other. The Tiger is significantly smaller than the TRANSALP in just about every dimension. Seat height is 835mm compared to the Honda's 850. The TRANSALP is relatively narrow, but the Tiger feels positively skinny. There's also less bike in front of you with the Triumph. You still feel as though you're sitting in the Tiger rather than on it, but the overall sensation is one of being less cocooned. The dash, bars and screen have all been downsized, and at least for me with my nearly 6'2" frame, I feel as if I'm riding a bike from the class below. It's not cramped, just less substantial than the Honda. The TRANSALP feels almost the same as the Africa Twin, but the Tiger feels more like my Speed Twin or the Trident on which it's based. This isn't a criticism. I have plenty of shorter friends who are always bemoaning how the size of modern bikes limits their choices. So here's a bike that you can put on your shortlist. So what about the engine? Well, the Tiger is at a 10 horsepower and 10 Newton meter disadvantage, and you can certainly tell. Objectively, on paper, there's not much in it, but as with the physical size, the TRANSALP feels the bigger bike. The Tiger isn't slow by any means, but it lacks the grunt of the Honda's larger capacity engine, and at the risk of annoying Tiger owners, the thought did initially cross my mind that it would be fairer to compare it to the CB500X rather than the TRANSALP 750. Once I'd racked up a few miles though, I realised this was a bit unfair. The Tiger is obviously faster than the 500X, but it feels less grown up, less meaty than the TRANSALP. But that's to be expected. Engine capacity, power and torque are all down by about 15%. What surprised me though was that it felt more like 20-25%. How about the brakes? I've never made a secret of the fact that I love big, fat, overpowered brakes, like you get on top-end sports bikes and hyper-nakeds like the Triumph Speed Triple or Ducati Panigale. The brakes on both the Tiger and the TRANSALP are not like this. They're fine, they do the job, but there's major fork dive and they just feel a bit wimpy. They're no worse than any other mid-priced bike and a whole lot better than some I've tried, but don't expect anything special. They work, they stop the bike, that's about it. Fuel economy? Well, I went on a 3-hour group ride in the Algarve Hills yesterday on the TRANSALP and averaged a quite remarkable 3.6 litres per 100 kilometres. We weren't riding that fast, but there were lots of bends and inclines, so I thought it was pretty impressive for a 750. The Tiger 660 averaged 4.7 during the day I had it, which is similar to the 4.5 I averaged on the very similar Trident 660 I had a couple of years ago. Decent fuel economy from the Triumph then, but outstanding from the Honda, especially considering there's an extra 100 cc's to feed. How about comfort? Well, the Honda does have a very plush ride with its giant 21-inch front wheel that glides over irregularities on both on and off-road, and supremely compliant suspension that soaks up the rest of the bump. 90% of the time this is exactly what I want, but I do have to say that when we were attacking some of the twisties yesterday, I could have done with a bit more tautness and rigour, particularly from the rear shock, and I did find myself wishing, if only for brief moments, that I'd opted to come on my Öhlins shod Speed Twin. The Tiger suspension is a little firmer, as befits its more road-focused remit, but as was the case with my Trident, the whole setup is let down by the rear shock, which is lazy and unresponsive. Handling on the road? Well, it's a win here for the Tiger, but only by a hair's width. A 21-inch wheel will never respond as well to changes in direction as a 17, but in all fairness, Honda's engineers have done a remarkable job on the TRANSALP and made the front wheel feel more like a 19-inch. But the Tiger has a not inconsiderable 20-kilo weight advantage and is a smaller bike physically, so it was always going to take this category. Turning is crisp, and the excellent Michelin Road 5 tyres give you more confidence in the bends than the skinnier mixed Metzeler Karoo street tyres that come with the TRANSALP. Fit and finish and features, well, usually Triumph walks it in this department, but the Tiger / Trident 660s are entry-level bikes, whereas the TRANSALP sits in the middle, more or less, of the Honda lineup. So I'm going to call it a narrow win for the TRANSALP. Both bikes are good, above average in paint quality, switchgear, etc., but neither is outstanding, with a fair bit of plastic on show. The Honda does have a more complete dash, but it's a bit too small and some of the information is difficult to read, although you do get the now famous grip angle, which of course Triumph owners can only dream of. I'm not really a fan of the rubbery fabric that Triumph have chosen for the seat. It's a step up from the weird giant condom texture found on the Trident, but it still feels a bit cheap and isn't stuck to the seat properly. The Honda has more ride modes and Bluetooth connectivity with turn-by-turn navigation as standard, while it's an option on the Triumph. But in my experience of all bikes, these gadgets never quite work as well as they're supposed to be, and to be honest, I rarely use them anyway. So which is the one to go for? Well, as regular viewers will know, I owned a Trident a couple of years ago. I enjoyed it, but ultimately sold it after 5 months because I always felt it was lacking in power, torque mostly, and in nice equipment. The brake pedal, for example, looks as if it was sourced on AliExpress. It's an entry-level bike, a bike for beginners or for people who see motorcycles primarily as a means of transport. It's good, but not quite enough to excite. Not the sort of bike you turn round and stare at lovingly in your garage. And to be fair, it has to be said, the TRANSALP is kind of the same. It's an SUV, an all-rounder, does what it says on the tin, gets you from A to B in comfort. It's affordable to buy and maintain. It sips fuel. It wins this head-to-head though, at least for me personally, for 2 reasons. First, its engine, which is significantly meatier than the 660 and the Tiger, and which provides a level of excitement that you wouldn't expect from a bike that looks as consensual as the TRANSALP does. Second reason, the TRANSALP can also go off-road. Okay, not too far, it's much more road biased than say a Tenere, but it is quite capable, and I've taken it on local gravel trails a few times. Similarly, if I were planning a longer trip, say more than a couple of days, I wouldn't hesitate to take the larger, more comfortable, beefier TRANSALP, and that's why I bought it. But you may very well have different priorities. If you're on the shorter side and looking more for a commuter that's easier to thread through traffic, then you could well be better off with the Triumph. But in my books, if you're okay with the seat height and have the extra €1,000, go for the Honda. Anyway, that's it for this particular quick test. If you have experience of the 2 bikes, let me know how you think they compare. Please consider subscribing if you enjoy this kind of road test, and as always, thanks for watching.